Chapter 14. Although still young, this 21st century has dramatically reminded us that we are social animals whose lives and cultures revolve around how we think about, influence, and relate to one another. On September 11, 2001, 19 men with box cutters achieved an act of catastrophic violence that triggered fright, outrage, and a lust for revenge. But it also triggered an outpouring of compassion and care, including gifts of more money, food, clothing, and teddy bears than New Yorkers could possibly use. What drives people to feel such hatred that they would destroy thousands of innocent lives? And what motivates the heroic altruism of those who died trying to save others and of the many more who reached out to those coping with loss? Echoes of these questions resurfaced after genocide plagued the Darfur region of Sudan beginning in 2003 and during the war in Iraq, where survey-based estimates of deaths ranged from 151,000 to more than 1 million from 2002 through 2006. Iraq Family Study 2008, Orb 2008. What factors affect the decision-making of our world leaders? And how can we transform the closed fists of international conflict into the open arms of peace and cooperation? This century has also challenged Americans' preconceived notions about race, gender, and age. The unprecedented 2008 U.S. presidential contest involved a 60-year-old white woman, Hillary Clinton, a 46-year-old African-American man, Barack Obama, and a 71-year-old white man, John McCain. Knowing that a difference of but a few votes could change the course of history, donors contributed hundreds of millions of dollars in the hope of influencing people's opinions. How do we form our attitudes, and how do those attitudes affect our actions? As each day's news has brought updates on acts of hate or heroism, defeats or victories, many of us have lived out our own experiences with love and loss. Why are we attracted to some people but not others, and what spurs friendship and romance? Human connections are powerful and can be perilous, yet we cannot live for ourselves alone, remarked the novelist Herman Melville. Our lives are connected by 1,000 invisible threads. Social psychologists explore these connections by scientifically studying how we think about, influence, and relate to one another. Section 14.1, Social Thinking. Our social behavior arises from our social cognition. Especially when the unexpected occurs, we analyze why people act as they do. Does her warmth reflect romantic interest, or is that how she relates to everyone? Does his absenteeism signify illness, laziness, a stressful work atmosphere? Was the horror of 9/11 the work of crazed people, or of ordinary people corrupted by life events? Section 14.1.1. Attributing behavior to persons or to situations. How do we tend to explain others' behavior and our own? After studying how people explain others' behavior, Fritz Heider, 1958, proposed an attribution theory. Heider noticed that people usually attribute others' behavior either to their internal dispositions or to their external situations. A teacher, for example, may wonder whether a student's hostility reflects an aggressive personality, a dispositional attribution, or a reaction to stress or abuse, a situational attribution. In class, we notice that Juliet seldom talks. Over coffee, Jack talks nonstop. Attributing their behaviors to their personal dispositions, we decide Juliet is shy and Jack is outgoing. Because people do have enduring personality traits, such attributions are sometimes valid. However, we often fall prey to the fundamental attribution error by overestimating the influence of personality and underestimating the influence of situations. In class, Jack may be as quiet as Juliet. Catch Juliet as the lead in the High School Musical, and you may hardly recognize your quiet classmate. An experiment by David Napolitan and George Goethals, 1979, illustrated the phenomenon. They had Williams College students talk, one at a time, with a young woman who acted either aloof and critical or warm and friendly. Beforehand, they told half the students that the woman's behavior would be spontaneous. They told the other half the truth, that she had been instructed to act friendly or unfriendly. What do you suppose was the effect of being told the truth? There was no effect. The students disregarded the information. If the woman acted friendly, they inferred she really was a warm person. If she acted unfriendly, they inferred she really was a cold person. In other words, they attributed her behavior to her personal disposition, even when told that her behavior was situational, that she was merely acting that way for the purposes of the experiment. Although the fundamental attribution error occurs in all cultures studied, this tendency to attribute behavior to people's dispositions runs especially strong in individualistic Western countries. In East Asian cultures, for example, people are more sensitive to the power of the situation. Masuda and Kitayama, 2004. You have surely committed the fundamental attribution error. In judging whether your AP psychology teacher is shy or outgoing, you have perhaps by now inferred that he or she has an outgoing personality. But you know your teacher only from the classroom, a situation that demands outgoing behavior. Catch the teacher in a different situation and you might be surprised. Outside their assigned roles, teachers seem less teacherly, presidents less presidential, servants less servile. Your teacher, on the other hand, observe his or her own behavior in many different situations, in the classroom, in meetings, at home, and so might say, me, outgoing? It all depends on the situation. In class or with good friends, yes, I'm outgoing, but at professional meetings, I'm really rather shy. When explaining the behavior of those we know well and see in varied situations, we are sensitive to how behavior changes with the situation. Itzen and Michelle, 2001. After behaving badly, we also recognize how the situation affected our own behavior. Recall the self-serving bias discussed in Unit 10? What about our own intentional and admirable actions? Those we more often attribute to our own good reasons than to situational causes. Mal, 2006, Mal et al., 2007. When explaining others' behavior, particularly the behavior of strangers we have observed in only one type of situation, we often commit the fundamental attribution error. We disregard the situation and leap to unwarranted conclusions about their personality traits. Many people initially assumed the 9/11 terrorists were obviously crazy, when actually they went unnoticed in their neighborhoods, health clubs, and favorite restaurants. Researchers who have reversed the perspectives of actor and observer by having each view a replay of the situation filmed from the other's perspective have also reversed the attributions. Lassiter and Irvine, 1986, Storms, 1973. Seeing the world from the actor's perspective, the observers better appreciate the situation. As you act, your eyes look outward, you see others' faces, not your own. Taking the observer's point of view, the actors better appreciate their own personal style. Reflecting on our own past selves of 5 or 10 years ago also switches our perspective. We now adopt an observer's perspective and attribute our behavior mostly to our traits. Cronin and Ross, 2006. Likewise, in another 5 or 10 years, our today's self may seem like another person. The effects of attribution. In everyday life, we often struggle to explain others' actions. A jury must decide whether a shooting was malicious or in self-defense. An interviewer must judge whether the applicant's geniality is genuine. A person must decide whether to interpret another's friendliness as genuine or motivated by self-interest. She just needs a ride. When we make such judgments, our attributions, either to the person or to the situation, have important consequences. Fincham and Bradbury, 1993, Fletcher et al., 1990. Happily married couples attribute a spouse's tart-tongued remark to a temporary situation. She must have had a bad day at work. Unhappily married couples attribute the same remark to a mean disposition. Why did I marry such a hostile person? Or consider the political effects of attribution. How do you explain poverty or unemployment? Researchers in Britain, India, Australia, and the United States, Furnham, 1982, Panday et al., 1982, Wagstaff, 1982, Zucker and Weiner, 1993, report that political conservatives tend to attribute such social problems to the personal dispositions of the poor and unemployed themselves. People generally get what they deserve. Those who don't work are often freeloaders. Anybody who takes the initiative can still get ahead. Society is not to blame for crime. Criminals are, said one conservative U.S. presidential candidate, Dole, 1996. Political liberals and social scientists are more likely to blame past and present situations. If you or I had to live with the same poor education, lack of opportunity, and discrimination, would we be any better off? To understand and prevent terrorism, they say, consider the situations that breed terrorists. Better to drain the swamps than swat the mosquitoes. Managers' attributions also have effects. In evaluating employees, they are likely to attribute poor performance to personal factors, such as low ability or lack of motivation. But remember the actor's viewpoint. Workers doing poorly on a job recognize situational influences, such as inadequate supplies, poor working conditions, difficult co-workers, or impossible demands. Rice, 1985. The point to remember, our attributions to individuals' dispositions or to their situations should be made carefully. They have real consequences.